Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com.
Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. If you're tuning into this podcast, you're going to hear a conversation by current and former journalists talking about some of the biggest headlines that have occurred within the last week that could be and will be impacting the real estate world in the Tri-County South Florida region. I pick 6 stories. I send them off to the journalists. I'm going to ask them to sort of cut through what we're reading and give us some sort of takeaway as to what the significance is of the article, as well as what also might be happening in the background. So before I go ahead and introduce our panel this particular week, let me just sort of lay out the rules of engagement. If you have any comments, you have any questions, you like what we're saying, you dislike what we're saying, please send any emails to inquiry@condovultures.com. That's INQUIRY@condovultures.com. If you're listening to this podcast on a traditional audio platform such as Apple, Google, Spotify, you should know that you can also watch it. Any platform that provides for video, we actually have a video that's going to be made available. And then also too, if you just want to skip through that, go right to YouTube. Our handle is Condo Vultures TV. That's Condo Vultures TV. So that being said, let me go ahead and introduce you to our panel for this particular week. Who are we going to start with? We're going to start off with a gentleman who is a reporter for 25 years, 20 years of which were in the state of Florida, wrote about real estate, wrote about business, wrote about banking. His name is John Gruss. John right now has a public relations and marketing firm called Gruss Communications. If you want to reach out and find out more about John, simply go to grusspr.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. What's going on, Mr. Gruss?
Oh, always great to be on your podcast, Peter. Thanks.
Love having you. You are the voice of reason of the regular contributors to this particular podcast. So let's go to the other side of the voice of reason. Let's go to a gentleman who was a journalist for 20 plus years, worked over at the South Florida Business Journal most recently. Right now, he does public relations and marketing. He is a consultant. It's no one else but John Fakler. If you want to get a hold of John Fakler, please send him an email to fakler@consultant.com. That's FAKLER at consultantsingular.com. CONSULTANT.com. What's going on, Mr. Fakler?
Not much, Peter. Good to be back. Thank you for the courteous introduction. Appreciate that.
No problem. Before we go any further, anybody who listened to last week's podcast, there was a little bit of bravado that Mr. Fakler was sharing with everybody. He pulled out a New York Jets hat. He put it on the air, talking about how a quarterback from Green Bay called Aaron Rodgers had been traded to the New York Jets and how the New York Jets were going to win their first championship since the 1960s. Turns out that trade hasn't gone through, Mr. Fakler. We're a week into it. And what's the latest on the trade? Not that we're trusting your intel when it comes to New York Jets football.
Well, as anyone who's watched the program or listened to the program over the years, we know that my acumen for predictions is not too good, whether it's a business story or a sports story. So it's still, they're still hanging in there. The deal is trying to be worked out. Apparently, the Packers won a first rounder, and the Jets are digging in their heels. They don't want to give it because we don't know if he's going to be around for a couple of years or longer. So I think that's what's holding it up right now. Both sides are digging in the heels. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
All right. It's going to happen. That's the second week in a row you're saying it's going to happen.
Yes, I am.
So let's go with something that's much more predictable and consistent. Okay. This gentleman's been a journalist for 40 plus years in South Florida. He's worked at a variety of different publications. Right now, he is a freelance journalist. It's no one else but Mike Seemuth. If you want to reach Mike, you can send him an email at mikeseemuth@gmail.com, MikeSeemuth@gmail.com. What's going on, Mr. Seemuth?
It's great to be back, man. I feel like the band has been reunited.
It has, absolutely. And we're delighted to have you back there. We got some really interesting stories this week. We can't wait to get your take on them. It should be fun. You know, I got yin and I got yang in terms of Jean and Mr. Fakler. So you'll be the deciding vote. So we love having you on board for this particular program. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to take our first commercial break. The other side of the break, we're going to get into our first three stories for the journalists.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to condovultures.com for more information. Condovultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. We're going to get into our first three stories. Again, I handpicked these articles. I sent them off to the journalists, asked them to read them, to review them, and ultimately provide some comments. What I will do is I will read the headline. I'll read the first couple graphs from the piece, and then I'll go to one of the journalists and I'll ask that person to go ahead and comment. The idea is to sort of cut through all the hyperbole, the fluff, and try to give you, the audience, an idea of what's actually going on in the marketplace based on the stories that are out there. So, Mike Seemuth, we're going to go to you with the first story. This story is going to come out of CNBC. I'll read you the headline. I'll read you the first three key points from this particular article. Then I'm going to ask you to comment. Yeah, you're somebody who's been on the ground in South Florida for decades. You've been a journalist for 40 plus years. So let's see if you can help the audience understand what really to make of this particular story. Headline: home sales spiked nearly 15% in February as immediate price drops for the first time in over a decade. The first time in over a decade, prices are actually coming down on the median basis. So that's the headline. Here's the first three key points. Point number one: sales of previously owned homes rose 14.5% in February compared with January, according to the seasonally adjusted count by National Association of Realtors. Point number two: it was the first monthly gain in 12 months and the largest increase since July 2020, just after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Point number three: higher mortgage rates have been cooling home prices since last summer, and for the first time in a record 131 consecutive months, which is nearly 11 years, prices were lower on a year-over-year comparison. So, Mr. Seemuth, we got a push-pull going here. It's saying the activity's up, but the prices are coming down. What should the audience take from this?
The activity is up on the lower end of the price scale because there's a lot of interest sensitivity at the lower end, and price sensitivity, of course, it's all part of the same thing. And in fall, 30-year mortgage rates fixed peaked at about 7%, and then they came down to about the 6% range. They stayed there in the mid to low 6% range for most of January. So there was some additional buying. I have a little bit of a problem with the story, though, because, you would think their interest rates were not a problem at all until you look at February versus February a year ago. The year-on-year decline was like almost 23%. It wasn't a 14.5% increase. But that was month to month, from January to February. But I do believe, that metric also has value because it shows that there's kind of a turning point maybe that's starting to happen. And as far as the median price, I just think it was just a little bit skewed to the bottom. It looked like the biggest sales declines were in the $1 million plus part of the market. So it's complicated, but
Mike, from the articles and the stories you're writing and the reporting you're doing, what are you kind of hearing on the street that maybe isn't being reflected yet in the statistics? So what's the real time talk versus maybe what the data will ultimately, show in the months ahead?
Well, Peter, we always hear that inventories are at historic lows, and the number that they were releasing today with this report was 2.6 months. It takes, there's virtually no inventory for sale, which is keeping prices very high. But I also kind of did a little extra Google search on this subject because I was curious about do Americans actually move less? And in fact, the moving rate is declining. Census data show that 8.4% of Americans moved in 2021, a historic low, down from 9.3% in 2020. And those numbers have been coming down from the double-digit range into the single digits in recent years. So I don't know if that has something to do with the fact that inventory are at historic lows because people are not putting things on the market. There's been so much buying that the market is sated. Uh, it's a curious time in the market. For
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Jean, we're going to go to you with the next story, but let me just throw out sort of related to the home sales. What I'm seeing in terms of running statistics, it doesn't matter if you're talking about South Florida as a region or you're talking about individual counties. I'm seeing that the number of days that properties are on the market versus what the average number of days it was for a completed transaction in 2022, it's starting to grow and grow and grow. So if there is this shortage of supply, why is it taking longer and longer and longer to supposedly sell one of these units? And Mike, I think it may be what you said, the high end stuff, you're seeing a slowdown, and the lower end type of stuff might actually be where all the, the activity is. So
I think that's what pulled the median price down. But still a remarkable thing after 11 years of not going
yes,
down.
yes. What a run it was. Okay, Jean, we're going to go to you with story number 2. This is also going to come from CNBC. For the record, I made a last minute adjustment to get this article in because I thought it was that significant. We've been talking a lot about the banking crisis that's currently underway. Some will say in the United States as well as in Europe. So everybody remembers you had Silvergate Bank get shut down. That was the bank for effectively the crypto industry. Then it was followed by Silicon Valley Bank, which is the bank for the tech industry out on the West Coast. And then more recently, we've had Credit Suisse, which is a Swiss bank, ultimately was forced into being acquired by UBS Bank, also out of Switzerland. So there's talk that maybe an Asian bank will probably be going next, but we'll have to see that. So that's the backdrop. Jean, let me go ahead. I'm going to read the headline. I'm going to read the first couple graphs. I'm going to ask you to comment. So headline, Silicon Valley Bank collapse was a Lehman moment for technology. Top Goldman Sachs dealmaker says. First couple graphs, the first 3 points. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank was a little bit like the Lehman moment for technology. Cliff Marriott, the co-head of tech, media, and telecom in Europe from Goldman Sachs investment banking division, told CNBC. Point number 2, Silicon Valley Bank, a vital source for funding for tech startups and venture capital firms, was shut down and taken over by the U.S. government after its clientele withdrew billions out of their account. And point number 3, Marriott said there was still a big question mark surrounding what company or companies might replace Silicon Valley Bank as a go-to bank for the tech industry. John, can you sort of address the significance of this comment about Silicon Valley Bank and it being a Lehman Brothers moment? But before you do so, can you kind of lay out real simple terms what happened with the Lehman Brothers moment, if you will, back in 2008?
Yeah, it was basically a run on the bank. Everybody freaked out and they wanted to yank their deposits. And part of the challenge here is that Silicon Valley Bank is like a club. Everybody belonged to it. It's the club for tech startups. And in fact, they have a branch in Brickell and they actually sponsor the Brickell Tech Tuesday, which is a monthly gathering of tech folks in Brickell, and Silicon Valley Bank is the sponsor of the event.
Wow.
Not anymore. But it's essentially, Silicon Valley Bank, they play fast and loose with their clients. Basically, if you're a tech startup and you're looking to raise money, you need to belong to the club because that's where all the venture capital folks, they gather, and then you get a loan from Silicon Valley Bank, and they require you to keep your deposits with the bank as well. So you get the loan. They sort of, I'm sure they don't tell them explicitly this, but you keep your deposits at Silicon Valley Bank, and then you go out and you do a fundraising round A, B, C. You keep raising money, and in between those times, you get loans from Silicon Valley Bank to keep you afloat. Now Silicon Valley Bank is out of the picture, and those loans may not be as easily accessible between your funding rounds as you grow your tech startup. So it creates all kinds of complications for tech startups and venture capital folks, because now access to easy money is not available anymore. And so that makes life real hard. I think tech startups may still be able to find other ways to raise money and to keep themselves afloat. But for sure, especially with the reaction of a lot of the tech folks freaking out, over the fact that Silicon Valley Bank was shut down means that a lot of tech startups are going to have a hard time getting financing, getting funded, and especially to cover sort of short-term needs, as bankers will be much less likely now to extend them any loans for fear of not being paid back. So Silicon Valley Bank was central to a lot of the tech startups, and I think for that industry, it's a real blow. And I know for a fact that there are companies in South Florida that depended on them for access to venture capital, access to loans, and financial services, a variety of financial services. So it's going to be interesting to see the fallout from that.
And John, just one follow-up question. I had read that the Federal Reserve is having a difficult time, or the FDIC is having a difficult time selling off Silicon Valley Bank. Typically, when the Fed shut down a bank, they shut it on a Friday, they reopen it on a Monday with a different banner. Well, when they shut down Silicon Valley Bank, they had to open it up. I think it was the Deposit Insurance Bank of Silicon Valley, or some name basically like that. It wasn't an outside party. But just recently, there was an article reporting that a bank out of North Carolina went into running to maybe take over the assets and liabilities for Silicon Valley Bank. And I just wonder, Sean, something called a research triangle up in North Carolina. Can you see any kind of synergies with maybe, the East Coast technology types of industries going ahead and trying to absorb this type of sector, or this type of, book of business, if you will? Or is it a situation where maybe they're just so out of whack and there's probably going to be no synergy whatsoever if you had a North Carolina bank try to acquire this California bank?
Yeah, I mean, it's pure speculation now, but I'm sure when you take a look at the loans that you'd be acquiring from Silicon Valley Bank, a lot of those loans are to tech startups that are unprofitable. So you have to start to wonder, what the credit quality of a lot of their customers are. And who wants to buy a bunch of loans that might, drag down the credit quality of your bank? So I think there's a lot of questions as to the quality of the loans that Silicon Valley Bank made to tech startups. And in this environment, I mean, you certainly don't want to be acquiring bad loans, and the tech industry is retrenching. So. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. And of course, a lot of the deposits fled. So, I mean, I'm not sure that there are a lot of deposits to be had, but those loans are worth something. Just a question of what they're worth and who's willing to take them on.
Interesting. Thanks, John. Thanks for that. Mr. Fakler, we're going to go to you. You've sort of become our expert in spring break and in torquing and in a variety of other things, just based on the conversations we've had over the years. We've talked about spring break. You actually made a recommendation to the city of Miami Beach as to how they can deal with their liquor license curfews, things like that. So I'm going to go to you with this latest story, and as background. 2 people were recently shot. So it's created this whole uproar. So that being said, let me read you the headline. Let me read you the first couple graphs, Mr. Fakler, and let's get your take out of it. This is coming from The Hill, thehill.com. Headline: Miami Beach rejects extending curfew in wake of deadly shootings. And first couple graphs: Miami Beach will not continue its spring break curfew next week, and city officials decided at a Monday special committee meeting that came in the wake of local violence. CBS News reports the Miami Beach commissioners voted 4-3 not to renew the curfew, enacted at 11:59 p.m. last Saturday following 2 deadly shootings. And this is a quote from the mayor, Dan Gelber. "We're making a big mistake," Gelber said. "I hope it's not one that results in something worse." The story goes on to say the curfew, which affected all areas south of Miami Beach's Dade Boulevard and required businesses to close by midnight, was intended to address excessively large and unruly crowds, according to the Miami Beach police. And the measures follow a similar curfew imposed around this time last year. Mr. Fakler, what's your first reaction?
Well, my first reaction here was that this story was not reported out very well.
Okay.
So when I say that reporting there wasn't a lot of reporting. There was a lot of really basic reporting. It was like a crime story and a tourism story. The fact is, it's a business story, and I'll tell you why it's a business story. When they were voting, and there was some reporting on this, and people were complaining. They had proposed to shut liquor stores from 6 to midnight. Maybe some metal detectors for guns, this and that. I'm not sure if those were voted through or not. But the important part was they had a business owner saying, listen, why should I be penalized? I have a liquor store. I want to be open, But the fact is, what they didn't report on was that this weekend that they voted to keep this curfew off is Ultra weekend. This is the International Music Festival from people where hundreds of thousands of people converge on Miami from all over the world. Now, granted, it's downtown Miami, but this spillover, because just a causeway away is Miami Beach. So that all those businesses, they don't want to lose out on their money. And they don't care if there's crime or not. If they're going to make this kind of reminds me of the Hamptons. I'm from New York, for most people don't know. And I mean, Hamptons is only open a couple of months. You go from New York City, you go there on vacation. People in the Hamptons, that's where they make their money during those 3 months. The rest of the year, they don't make anything. Miami makes their money from these festivals, and Ultra is one of the premier festivals, much like Art Basel, where the coffers are full from the government, but also for the businesses. So I'm just surprised that it hasn't been talked about, but I really feel that in my opinion, that's the reason why the curfew was turned down.
So, Mr. Fakler, based on that logic, if Ultra, this electronic dance music festival, if you will, that's going to go on in downtown Miami, has been going on for a number of years. So based on that logic, you say the curfew isn't extended this upcoming week during Ultra. So would that mean once Ultra is over, which would be the subsequent week, would you expect the curfew to be put back in place?
Well, it's interesting, the timing of this, because it's also still spring break, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. If it is, then Ultra is, I guess, almost a moot point for the following week, because if the spring break lasts another week or two, it's still going to be an issue as far as crime, as far as, tourists and
we're going to have to watch it. That's a very interesting point. So let's go ahead and we'll take a commercial break. Other side of the break, I'm going to come to the reporters with 3 additional stories. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with CVRrealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com. Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. We're going to talk about our next 3 stories that I handpicked. I asked the journalists to go ahead and take a look at, and we're going to ask them to cut through some of the fluff that might be out there to give you the real take on that particular piece. So our 4th story, we're going to start off with John Fakler. John, we're going to go to you with this piece because a lot of articles that are written about the condo market in South Florida, the real estate market, always talks about how the prices are going up and everything is luxury. And you can live this lifestyle based on Instagram and TikTok and everything else. If you come down here and you buy one of these condos, and everything will simply be brilliant, whether you're a primary user, you are a second home buyer, or you're an investor who's trying to turn around and rent out this product. So that's the backdrop. That's the context in which I selected this story. This is coming out of Local 10, which is the ABC affiliate down here in South Florida. Website is local10.com. Headline: Miami condo valet helps rob zip tie residents, police say. And first couple graphs: as a valet attendant, Antoine Lusant was hired to help the residents of the Area on the Bay condominium. Miami police say he robbed one of them instead. And Area on the Bay is a luxury condo located in downtown Miami in the Edgewater area. Next graph: Antoine Lusant, 43, of Hollywood, Florida, faces charges of armed robbery, kidnapping, and burglary. He appeared in front of Miami-Dade Judge Mindy Glazer on Wednesday, who ordered he remain behind bars without bond. Philip Velcy Charles, 26, was arrested in the case. According to Miami police, the crime happened in the luxury high-rise located at 488 Northeast 18th Street in the city's Edgewater neighborhood. Just before 12:45 a.m. on January the 20th, police say the victim was walking out of his apartment to meet his friends when he saw Lusant and Velcy Charles exiting the elevator and walking towards him. The report states that one of the men pulled out a gun, ordered the victim back into the apartment, and ordered him to give up his jewelry that he had on. The victim then laid on the ground and the two proceeded to zip tie his hands and feet together, police wrote, then ransacked his apartment. Mr. Fakler, there's always anomalies. There's always situations. It makes me, it reminds me of a case a few years back in Sunny Isles Beach, which is a high-end community in Northeast Miami-Dade County on the Barrier Island, where a valet was involved with kidnapping. And then they were holding people for ransom. So the valet was a spotter. The FBI got involved. The whole variety of things went on. So I just wonder if you could sort of address the Instagram concept that we hear about Miami luxury condos. If you drop over $1 million on a condo versus sort of some of the reality that sort of go on the street. And why doesn't the industry ever talk about it?
Well, this definitely falls under the category of only in Miami. And I'd like to refer to a phrase you like to use. It's all going to shit. And the reason why I say that is because, as you know, Peter, because we both lived in the Edgewater neighborhood, it was billed as an up and coming neighborhood, high class, high end, luxury, so to speak. And even though you had condos, you had an influx, and you still have a lot of rental construction going on in the neighborhood, but it's still billed as a luxury area. And so people, they move there. They think they're going to be safe. They're secure. There's plenty of security in the area. But yet you still have these scams where people are preyed upon. And I'm glad you mentioned that Sunny Isles case, because that's very, very similar to this in executions, let's say. But, I think Edgewater, much like other neighborhoods, have seen their best days. Unless a concerted effort is made, even on a public relations front, to get out in front of this issue, because this is not the first. We've had murders in the area. We've had people shot. We've had people robbed within a few blocks of this particular building. So, it's the whole neighborhood that's kind of, you got some lady was run over, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. She was on a bicycle, right on US 1, Biscayne, I should say.
Biscayne, yep.
So, I don't know if they ever caught the guy or whatever, but I mean, it's terrible, really, because I always thought it was a nice neighborhood when I moved in. And that was about 8 years ago. I think I was there for 5 years. And, I kind of couldn't wait to get out.
Interesting. John or Mike, did you guys like to add anything about the perception of luxury living in South Florida and Miami versus maybe, some of the realities? And granted, this is an anomaly. And if you guys disagree, please push back.
Well, you can't let your guard down. I mean, just because you move into a $1 million condo, you're still living in a city where there's crime and poverty. I mean, there's still a lot of people struggling, and they make ends meet by stealing and robbing you. And you can't be thinking that you're living in a $1 million condo and you have this super high security all around you. I mean, I think people sometimes let their guard down. They think Miami is this sort of paradise on earth, especially when you get here. But the fact remains that, it's still a city. It's dangerous. There's dangerous people around, and you just can't let your guard down.
Great point. Mike, would you like to add anything before we move on to the next piece?
I lived in Edgewater for 6 years, approximately, in 2 different buildings. Well, but I lived there in the late 90s and the early 2000s.
Wow.
And it was an up and coming kind of an area back then, but there was a lot of edge in Edgewater.
It was also known as Needle Park.
Yeah, that park on the bay.
Yep. They called it Needle Park. I know there's one in Manhattan. I've heard that term used for it at one point.
So if you're a New Yorker and you're moving to Miami, you're not going to leave everything that's wrong with New York behind. I think that's
true.
That's being made here.
Yep, that's a great point. As well as the $50 chicken parmesan that they sell at some restaurant at South Beach that we talked about a year and a half ago or so. So you're right. You're not leaving it all behind. Let's go on with story number 2. John, we're gonna go to you. Miami during the last few years has really been caught up in the crypto bros, if you will. There was a lot of money being made in crypto. It was this brand new currency, if you will. Miami-Dade County government signed a contract, an entity, an exchange to have signage on the name of the arena. So the American Airlines Arena name was changed, and FTX, which was this exchange, replaced it. It was a long-term type of deal. What was it? 9-figure contract, if you will. And lo and behold, the crypto world started to fall apart. This company that was sponsoring the what was previously known as the American Airlines Arena, they ended up going BK. The gentleman who ran it, got arrested. He was extradited from the Bahamas. There's been a lot of ups and then suddenly a dramatic fall as it pertains to crypto in Miami. It was going to be the next big industry for Miami. So that's the background. Let's go to this story. This is coming out of Miami today. And for what it's worth, when I first got here in 1993 to Miami, when I was a journalist, this was my first gig. Miami Today newspaper. They used to be located right there on Brickell and 8th Street. They've since moved towards the Grove, and this and their site's going to be replaced with some 80-story mixed-use building. So that being said, John, here's the headline. Here's the first couple graphs. Rosy vision of Miami as a cryptocurrency hub, now bleak. First couple graphs. The future of Miami as a cryptocurrency hub is uncertain as the overall digital trading world is crumbling. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez has consistently promoted cryptocurrency and even dubbed the city as the crypto capital. Miami was to launch a unique collection of 56 non-fungible tokens, NFTs as they're called, in December of 2022. The launch has since been stalled with no updates from the mayor or partners on the release. So, John, my question to you is the crypto bro in the Miami, is the crypto capital, is that sort of passe and gone? Or is this simply just, a step back before you go too forward?
Well, I mean, you have to discern between the crypto, as a currency or whatever it might be. Actually, I don't think it's been quite even defined yet, even by the regulators, and the blockchain technology that underpins it. And there's actually some possibility that blockchain technology might be an up and coming technology, and I think that might still be viable. However, there's just been so many scams involving crypto that it's given Miami sort of a black eye. And it's these things are sometimes hard to predict. There was really quite a bit of hoopla and excitement about crypto and NFTs and all this sort of digital currencies. Why not? Why not get excited about it and promote it? And for a while it worked. Miami even had its own digital coin, Miami coin, which promptly fell in value by 99%. Actually, it's not even traded anymore. I think trading's halted. It was, I think, the mayor said at some point Miami coin would be so valuable that it would pay for the entire city's budget. So, just fantastical claims of never-ending, of free money, basically. So there was a lot of hoopla, and unfortunately for the city, I mean, it's been a bit of a headache recently with FTX, for example, the arena having lost its sponsorship. But I do think that it did put Miami on the map for folks in technology. And let me tell you, these technology folks are die hard. They are not an easy bunch to take down. They're still very positive. In fact, I was just checking the price of Bitcoin today. It's up 70% so far this year. And some of that's related to the banking crisis that we're experiencing right now. But, these folks are true believers, and they don't, they're not taking this downturn, crypto downturn, as any sign of weakness. In fact, they're buying more. I think Kathy Wood, the money manager, who is famed for her bets on technology, she was actually in Miami a couple of weeks ago and told the crowd here that Bitcoin was going to $1 million. So the price of Bitcoin has gone to $1 million. So you can take that to the bank. So Miami, Miami's a city of dreams, dreamers and schemers and scammers. So it's not surprising that that crypto has a home here, and it's had its setback, and the city's had its setback. I don't think crypto is totally out of the game here, because Miami, being Miami, it's going to be home to those kinds of people, and it's going to be around, and it'll keep us entertained. Let's just put it.
And Mike, before I go to you, I will say I saw an interview on CNBC with Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami, who is the one who is behind the establishment of the Miami coin, which apparently doesn't even trade anymore. And he was asked, "Are you still getting paid in Bitcoin?" Remember, Bitcoin peaked out at like what, $65,000 to $70,000, and now, John, how much is it?
28,000.
Now it's 28,000.
Yeah.
And Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami, said yes, he's still getting paid in Bitcoin, although he doesn't feel like he's getting paid for all the work he has to do. So that being said, Mike Seemuth, we're going to go to you for story number 6. This is going to come out of the Commercial Observer. And let me give everybody a little bit of background. So there is a street, basically it's known as the financial capital of South Florida. Many say the financial capital of Latin America. That's called Brickell Avenue. Brickell Avenue basically is a 4-lane, for the most part, road where there's a bunch of high rises, a bunch of financial institutions are located there, as well as condominiums. It used to be mansions. It used to be some of the old grand Miami homes of some wealthy industrialists or those people who came to Miami early on. And one of the remnants left of that era, if you will, is a church right in the heart of the financial district. So sky rises all around it, condos trading for, north of $500 a square foot. Some will tell you north of $1,000 a square foot. And you got this church kind of right in the middle, right there on Brickell Avenue. So that's the backdrop, Mike. Before I go ahead and I read the first couple of graphs and I ask you to comment. Again, coming from the Commercial Observer. So headline is 13th floor, which is a private equity fund. 13th floor under contract to buy historic Brickell Church. First couple graphs. It's official. 13th floor investments in Key International are under contract to buy a historic Presbyterian church in Miami's Brickell district. Initial development plans include building an 80-story luxury tower onto the surface parking lot of the First Miami Presbyterian Church, which faces Biscayne Bay, and a building that houses a religious school. The church, built in 1949, was designated as a historic landmark in 2003, would remain. So, Mike, the plan is for the parking lot of this church, which is facing the water, to go ahead and get an 80-story tower, and then the west side of the property where the church is currently standing to be able to continue to operate as is with some sort of changes in place. What's your take on this? And you've written stories about this. Can you share with the audience, sort of how you see this and where you see this thing going? Because this was reported a long time ago that the church wanted to dump the property. But here we are a couple years later and still for sale, and apparently it's just going on the.
Yeah. Well, I've done some reporting on this. In fact, I've written an unpublished article, maybe published tomorrow, by the Commercial Observer about church redevelopment in South Florida. Because over time, these older churches with east of 95 and even west of 95 locations have their property is appreciated in value. And and COVID also affected some of these churches and kind of knocked them off their feet. That COVID did play a role in the case of this particular church, First Miami Presbyterian. It was completely closed for 2 years, except for like a Sunday thing online. No real email back and forth with the members. At least this is what I'm getting from a guy who was the lead opponent of the sale of the church, an attorney by the name of Gary Tolley. And he went through the hierarchy of the church to get the sale stopped. And last September, the Miami Herald, which is the leading publication on this story, by the way, they broke the story that they didn't really say it was under contract then, And I guess it is now. And I'm not really sure what the terms are, but it's been reportedly valued at $240 million. However, I've also heard from Mr. Tolley that really and the Herald has reported too, a lot of that's kind of conditional based on sales of condos. You're going to get a piece of that, retail sales participation, condo sales participation, or some money up front, not $240 million. I don't think in cash. I don't think that's the type of deal that we're talking about here. So it's a pretty heavy lift. Mr. Tolley told me that a real estate source told him that he thinks that right before this announcement came out, that the sale was indefinitely on hold. And I have that's just pure rumor. I have nothing. And then next thing I knew, it looks like it's confirmed that it's going forward. But the whole story was based on a document that was filed at the Miami-Dade recorder's office. And it was just a memo referring to a definitive agreement with none of the details of the agreement. So I don't know, it's kind of a little bit of a fishy development in the story. I was asked if I wanted to write it, and I said no. I didn't think it was anything new that the Herald hadn't already reported, really. And it didn't really say definitively that it is it did say it was under contract. So I'll take that back. Yeah.
Mike, it's interesting. You're talking about churches ultimately being converted into real estate developments, and the churches being able to benefit from it. Makes me think of Unity on the Bay, which was a church right there in the Edgewater area. It makes me think of a church that was located up in the Design District in Miami. Then you had some others in Coral Gables. There was I think it was a Methodist church where an office tower replaced it. And then most recently, PMG built a rental, which was converted into a condo right there in downtown Miami. So it's an interesting trend. And I wonder what the symbolism is of these religious institutions suddenly being replaced by crypto bros and what did you call it, John? Schemers and scammers and who else?
And dreamers.
And dreamers. Mike, based on the reporting you've done, anything you could sort of share with us in terms of trends and maybe how some of the people who attend some of these churches for whatever denomination or whatever religious institution they go to, what their take is on it? Is simply everything going online? Now they're doing hybrid and they get the tax break, so they might as well cash in, or is there something a little bit more to it where people simply aren't attending down here and therefore the church isn't, it's not warranted or needed anymore?
This is a godless place. No, seriously. I mean, a lot of this is just right sizing for a lot of the churches. One of the most important points that I take away from the story that I haven't published yet is that, that unlike other sellers of real estate, these guys usually want to stay on the property, right? They want you to build them a new church, maybe a smaller one. Hell, just 1 mile south of me in Pembroke Pines, Florida, which is a suburb of Fort Lauderdale, there's a Lutheran church which is sits on a 5-acre site. They're going to demolish the old church. It's a 1960s relic. Move it to the back of the property off Busy Pines Boulevard and put a Wawa there. So it runs the gamut. It runs the gamut. And I talked to Jeff Burns. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff. He's a developer with affiliated properties in Fort Lauderdale. Yes. He went after a couple of churches, was successful with one, unsuccessful with another one, because the hierarchy came down and vetoed the sale by the locals. So there's a lot of internal politics. And he said to me, all of these people want to do something, not a good legacy. They want to do something good with the property. And so there's a lot of courtship that goes along with these kinds of deals. That's why they really don't happen very often. I'm not even saying that it's happening more often. I'm speculating that more churches are thinking about it, just because prices are so high for everything. And it's so scarce down here. There's nowhere to go. I mean, the Everglades, the ocean,
Well, in terms of legacy, they can always take the money and buy Bitcoin. So with that, we're going to take a commercial break. The other side of the break, I'm going to ask all the journalists to go ahead and share some of their words of wisdom as we go into the second quarter of 2023 in South Florida. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I've been in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are a institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to peter@condovultures.com. That's peter@condovultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859.
Welcome back to Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. We discussed 6 stories and sort of cut through it, gave you, the audience, an idea of sort of what might be going on behind the scenes, what's important, what's not important, sort of cutting through some of that fluff. Now I'm going to ask our journalists to go ahead and share some words of advice. Maybe some people in the audience, they've just haven't been down here in South Florida for a short time. Many of us have been here a number of years, so maybe we all can share some parting thoughts for some of the people who have just moved down here. And as the economy starts to teeter, as we're dealing with a potential banking crisis, there might be some things that, be on the lookout for just in case. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the journalists to go ahead and share some words of wisdom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with John. I will then go to Mike Seemuth, and then we'll wrap it up with John Fakler. So, Mr. Gruss, why don't you share some words of wisdom based on everything going on, and as we are getting ready to enter the second quarter of 2023 with a potential recession looming in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, for South Florida, I think one really good indicator is to keep your eye on airport traffic numbers. When you look at the passenger numbers, so far they've held up pretty well. I was just looking up the Miami International numbers. The domestic passenger traffic is up, around 4 or 5%. International passenger traffic is up significantly more. So that's a bit of a canary in a coal mine. So when you look at, how the real estate season is going to go, the tourism season, really keep an eye on those airport numbers. And in fact, I have a sort of a theory about spring break and in South Beach. I don't know if you remember, but in the last couple of years, a lot of discount airlines have started operating out of Miami International Airport, like Spirit and Southwest and JetBlue. And my theory is that cheap fares have brought a lot of the spring breakers down here. And it seems to me more than a coincidence that spring break has gotten really out of hand just at the same time that these discount airlines have boosted their traffic into Miami. And I'm wondering if there's a connection there between cheap fares and this sort of spring break madness and the explosion of spring break in Miami Beach, because I don't remember spring break being that wild before. And so anyway, that's just a sort of an aside. And I'd still keep, I think generally the discount airlines have been good for Miami because it's brought additional traffic and passengers. It's lowered a lot of the fares into Miami, which are been traditionally higher than, say, Fort Lauderdale. But definitely keep an eye on those numbers.
That's pretty interesting, John. Mike, what about you? How about share some words of wisdom, if you will, with the audience?
Well, Miami does attract and encourage hoopla and hype. So that's something that I would say as a reminder to people who are moving here for the first time and looking for that place to live. And also, I would say that, some of the players down here are not well known and not well respected. But we were talking about one, for example, just a minute ago, 13th Floor Investments, which is a very solid citizen among developers down here. And I'm almost sorry that I said that this church sale may not be going through based on kind of pure hearsay. If anybody can make it go through, these guys together with Key International can make it go through. And if you're coming here and you're going to buy a new condo from somebody, you should know it's a developer like these guys, and not some of the fly-by-nights. And it's going to get dicey as the economy gets a little more dicey. So I'm afraid that on somebody like 13.4, you got to know who you're working with. 'Cause I think they're a good group to be working with.
That's a great point, Mike. And I will point out to people, John, before we go to you, I'll point out to people, as you start to see these green fields scattered around Miami, those are not public parks. Those are actually development sites that never got built upon. So Mr. Fakler, what about your words of advice?
What I would advise is, if you're going to be renting, we're starting to see rental prices come down, which was forecast. But I would suggest, if you're going to make that relocation move, to wait to the summer months. We're at the tail end of the winter now, which is still the buying season, so to speak. But I would wait until the summer, and I think there'll be many deals to be had in all parts of mostly the middle range and low range rental.
John, that's a great segue into my words of wisdom. I just read an article talking about how all of the units are getting squeezed. So there was a ranking where Seattle in the Pacific Northwest actually has some of the smallest rental units available. And what's happening is, as prices go up, developers still have to build for the same amount. What they do is they shrink the quantity, much like if you're going out and you're buying a snack and you're still paying the same price, but now suddenly instead of getting 4 ounces, you're getting 2 3/4 ounces. That's kind of what's going on. So I would suggest to anybody who's looking to buy or rent in South Florida, look at the price per square foot. Do not focus on the price per door. How much does it cost per month? Don't focus on what the end number is on rent or the price for the particular unit. Take the price per square foot, divide it through, and see if you're actually getting a good deal, or whether or not you're suffering from this whole shrinkage effect that's going on. Let's go ahead and wind down this podcast. I want to thank all of our roundtable panelists. We got John Gruss. He was a journalist for 25 years, 20 years of which were in the state of Florida. Right now, he runs a public relations and marketing firm called Gruss Communications. You can find him online at grusspr.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. Also want to thank Mike Seemuth. He's been a journalist for 40 plus years. Right now, he's a freelance journalist. If you want to reach out to Mike and you got any story ideas, you want to pitch him something, maybe you want to sell him some Bitcoin, you can reach Mike at MikeSeemuth@gmail.com. MikeSeemuth@gmail.com. And I also want to thank John Fakler. He might not be able to predict trades that go on in the NFL because Aaron Rodgers is still not a member of the New York Jets and maybe never will be. But that being said, if anybody wants to reach out to John, his email address is fakler@consultant.com. Fakler@consultant.com. And I'm Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, you have any comments for us, send an email to inquiry@condovultures.com, INQUIRY@condovultures.com. And also, too, if you want to watch this podcast, you can go to any platform that provides for video, or you can look us up on YouTube, where the handle is Condo Vultures TV. That's Condo Vultures TV. Until next time, ciao, ciao.
Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.